But I'd like to welcome everybody and wish blessings and peace and fullness of joy and insight into our event this evening, and turn it over to Mr. Greg Frezados.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thanks for joining everybody. I'm glad we're getting together to discuss this, something we all, well, as a self-selecting kind of a thing, we're in this for a reason. I know why we're here, and I hope to learn from each other. So since this is not a huge group, please speak up, and let's make this as conversational as possible. I've got about 10 slides here, which I hope just provide an outline to the state of plastic pollution and some ideas, but just some of what we might do about it as consumers, as citizens of the country and the world. So just to start off with the basics as I saw it, I mean, this is scope. I don't know how much bigger this could be, and it's only getting worse. I learned that since the United Nations started keeping these records in 1950, the amount of plastic that the United States and the world uses is just going up, and it's not slowing down at all. The last year I could find 2018, so almost 400 million tons of plastic are just created by this country. And roughly 40% of that are the dreaded single-use plastics. These are things that are just meant to be, you know, buy a bottle of water and then get rid of it. Thus, we don't see any, you know, at this rate, any slowing down of this. I also learned that plastic is, well, it's ubiquitous. It's in things that are obvious. They're probably in a lot of things that a lot of us don't know, other than, you know, our fleece jackets and other things like that, which I guess are sometimes recycled. Synthetic fabrics are filled with plastic. Plastics, of course, our computers, our cell phones, our cars. It's hard to think of life without it, which makes it even, you know, I think more pressing for us right here, right now, to see what we can do about the problem. And the problem, there's the next bullet point. It's a direct, you know, how humans have created and continue to warm the planet in dangerous ways. So at this rate, the average temperature across the planet is going to be 1.5 degrees Celsius higher in 10 years. And there's a lot to read. The last slide, I've got some places to take a look at and go deeper into what the scientists have told us about what, you know, 1.5 degrees Celsius in 10 years would actually mean. I mean, the temperature can go up a few degrees every day and it doesn't mean much to us in our daily lives, but then there's the research, and it's not too hard to find, especially on the internet, of what we're doing and how a lot of our coasts, you know, might not exist because because we're just using more and more plastics, creating them and polluting the planet. The ice caps are melting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So warming the planet, first of all, and then just the pollution of what these particles of plastic, big and small, are doing to the oceans, to our land, to the air, and to us. Every animal in the food chain are being affected here.
Hey, Greg, since you invited interruptions, let me interrupt you. On that previous slide, you said the production of plastics is itself a direct cause of climate change. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, in a couple of slides, I'll get to that. Let me show that to you, Jeffrey.
Or we can get to it when it's in your sequence.
Yes, I'll get into the exactly. I put some details in there, but first of all, just to, you know, for the sake of just knowing what's going on here and the world we're living in, this is basically how they've been made. For decades, it was basically from oil. Now natural gas is used to create the plastic in the first place. And so the extraction of natural gas and petroleum, we know what problems those cause. And so here it is. Liquid natural gas is used to make different types of plastics. It's common stuff. And I'm sorry, right now on the screen, I can't read everything I've written here, and I didn't print it off, but I hope you can see everything there. Let's see, where was I? And here we are, Jeffrey. So digging for the oil and the gas to make the plastic in the first place, the excavation and the transportation, the whole process of creating the plastics, refining these things. That process emits greenhouse gases. And there's just no two ways around it. That's why, we're going to be talking about recycling and reducing our uses in a little bit, but some have a good argument these days that the only way to fix this is just to leave it in the ground, as we say. So even what I think some natural gas industry lobbyists and some politicians will say, calling something clean natural gas or efficient natural gas, that the best they've ever been able to do is only emit half of the CO2 into the atmosphere that an old coal plant produces. Besides the digging and the excavation and everything, to find more oil and gas, a lot of trees have to be chopped down. That's always happened on private lands, and legally, more of our public lands are being used for this purpose. And of course, there's another tragic side effect here. With less trees, that in and of itself is contributing to global warming as well. And I didn't know that, fracking itself is a bugaboo for all environmentalists, but that process itself emits a lot of methane. And that greenhouse gas, 84 times more heat is released than, it traps 84 times more heat than simple, good old carbon dioxide. So that's the production. Now, using the plastic and what we do after we use it. So once it's produced, as you can see, it's dumped. We do what we can to recycle it, but a lot of it just ends up being thrown away, incinerated. And the stuff that's thrown away, well, the incineration obviously poisons and heats up our atmosphere. And then just dumping it into landfills one way or another, a lot of it ends up in our water. There are many, many stories, and I hope again on the last slide, some of the referral sites and publications and agencies that I've listed can give you a lot more details and help spur you on to be more thoughtful and activist about how to fix this all. I read something about it, but the details are even gorier, actually, about microplastics, which wind up in the fish that we eat, and who knows how much microplastics our bodies, our organs contain right now. I'm not sure if the average American physician knows about what damage that can do to the human body. So again, by 2040, we're estimating that the amount of plastic right now in the ocean will have doubled. That's just in 20 years. So the problem is, every chart I've seen pretty exponential. And I mentioned the incineration problem about releasing greenhouse gases. So, and because there was the title, what we wanted to do is let's get down to what we can do today. And since, in the last 7 or so months, things have changed. Our consumer behaviors have changed. And we've all been to, in the grocery store. A lot of places just won't allow you to bring your own bag in because of COVID fears. And let's just be clean and avoid, the coronavirus by just taking another bag from the grocery store, whether it's paper or plastic. And we'll get to some more, I want to hear some ideas about what people are doing as far as their consumer behaviors. But right now, just from the macro level, when all the lockdowns started, back in March here in Illinois, I didn't realize how much this had happened, but economic, output went down, so there's less of a global demand for plastic. That should be a good thing, right? Well, no, it made the price of oil go down, making everybody think it was okay to use more, to make more, and to use more plastic. So that's something I think we all should just be at least, conscious of. And then to our consumer habits. Like I said, I've personally run into a lot of ways where it's just a little more difficult to not use so much plastic. And now I'd love to hear your ideas, because I'm sure a lot of you have more than me. These are just the first things that I could think of, and they're not all of them. I just wanted to cut it down, and I hope this is thought-provoking for some of us. Tell me what you think about these things. First of all, because there's a debate over recycling. Some scientists I've heard of don't think recycling is really worth it, because the process of recycling is just making us use more plastic. And the processing, the whole way of doing it is bad for the environment. So, rather than recycle, why don't we just try not to use it in the first place? So abstention is the word that came to mind for me. Why don't we think about, and I hope this is helpful to some people. I hope you're probably doing it already, but using reusable cups, and avoid plastic forks and knives from fast food restaurants and things like that. We can consider in the grocery store. Buy your vegetables loose, and just put them in your bag or your recyclable container rather than the prepackaged sorts. Of course, plastic straws. I see even places like Starbucks, I think, don't have them. Maybe it's just all paper straws now. So plastic straws, plastic bags, water bottles, soda bottles, and the styrofoam takeout containers, I hope are some things that can be avoided. Paper and cardboard rather than plastic whenever possible in any way. Carrying reusable grocery bags and bagging when your friendly neighborhood grocer understands and might allow it. And soap. We're all using a lot of hand sanitizer these days. And liquid soaps, guess what? They all come in these tiny little plastic containers. Maybe buy them in bulk if you have to use them at all. But easier than liquid soap is just a good old-fashioned bar of soap. And I understand we all have our different worries here about friends of ours and people who've tragically come down with the virus. But I just got to tell myself, using a bar of soap removes the germs from the skin on my hands just as easily. And like I said, in bulk, buying as much as you can in bulk just makes sense. There's less packaging and wrapping that's needed for the same amount of product. And for your leftovers, I didn't realize, but I should have, don't need Tupperware anymore. So glass jars, if you have any leftovers after dinner. Is this helpful? Any other ideas or things you guys are doing right now that might be helpful?
So Greg, I have a couple of thoughts. I think abstention or elimination is definitely the way to go. I think the more we're learning about what really happens with plastic recycling and what some of the information that I've been recently exposed to is would say that was never and is never going to be our solution in dealing with plastics. That less than 10% of plastic that has ever been recycled, and the industry's known all along that that the economics are never going to favor recycling over new, and in fact, all their incentives really are to, create new product. That's how they make money. So I think we've been had. Now we know we've been had. It's time to find other ways of controlling this rampant source of waste, and that may require both consumer action, and it may require consumer advocacy for legislation.
That's true. Thank you, Steve. I wanted to get to that before we ended, after brainstorming and hearing everyone's thoughts and current practices as a consumer, to talk about advocacy as well. Is there anyone else who's been finding other ways to abstain or reduce their plastic use? I'd love to hear them.
Sure, Greg, this is King 4. Can you hear me? We've had discussions at church and elsewhere about how we reduce plastic use, and this is what I would call the micro approach, and we'll get to the macro approach. But so often we think, well, what can one person do? What can one family do? But it's a beginning, and it's a changing of attitude. That change of attitude will eventually find its way into the corporate decision makers. That's why Starbucks is doing what it does, or the whole idea of reducing plastics is becoming more and more mainstream in a way that it wasn't 10 years ago. And so, for instance, we've stopped using saran wrap, which is a plastic product, to cover food. We now have these beeswax covers, which you can buy. It's very easy.
Yep.
And you save beeswax. We put all of our leftovers in glass containers now. We haven't used Tupperware in a long time. We buy soap in bars, just as you were saying. And this is kind of an interesting tip that I picked up from one of the members of our churches. We've often been a big consumer of yogurt, and if you go by the yogurt aisle in any grocery store, and that's just like a wall of plastic. And my wife figured out she bought a yogurt maker and started making yogurt at home. So I mean, that was kind of cool. And we've tried to buy juice and milk and things that are not in plastic containers. I mean, there's alternative. You get the cardboard and that kind of thing. So I mean, if you start thinking about it, there's alternatives out there, and it's I think a good family project to figure out all the ways that you can substitute plastic. And sometimes maybe you just say, you know what, I don't really need it that much. If I can't buy it in glass or some other paper, maybe we can just live without it. And so, I mean, that's a big part of it. And just as a quick example, just as when we started this green team at Kenilworth Union, we decided it was really kind of a symbolic gesture, but that all of our communion cups are plastic. And we decided that we would convert that into glass. And I know Catherine's on I see her there, and she was instrumental in helping us find a vendor that would sell us glass communion cups. I mean, you could say, well, it's so symbolic, but when we added it up, it probably is close to 2,000. Well, this is pre-COVID, of course, but it translates into about 2,000 communion cups. So again, you can say this is a little thing, but it does raise people's awareness, and that's how you start. You've got to go beyond that, and we'll talk hopefully about the macro, and
Yes.
that's the advocacy piece, because the people who make these decisions will be leaders, and that helps move the discussion. But we're going to have to approach this on the macro level too, and that means policy changes in legislation, new laws, and there's a lot of work to be done there. But it's got to start somewhere, and I think it does start with at the home, but then it doesn't stop at the home. It has to go out from the home.
Great points, King. Thank you so much. I like that. Just psychologically doing away with the, oh, what's my, one person's, change gonna ever do? I can't do much, but that's how, how nothing ever gets done because of that. Because if everybody thought like that, nothing would get done. But sharing ideas like this, especially in a place like our churches, where it can be, inspiring others to do more, and becomes, I hope, more than symbolic, that we can, and I'm sure both of our churches have talked quite a bit about the biblical textual, sources for inspiration here, but taking care of our earth. So thank you very much. And yes, it's a good segue. Just moving a little, I had a few more consumer things which I wanted to gradually get into the macro. So a few other things though. Tell me what you think of these. I'm sure this is not news to this great, group of people. Just avoiding plastics. Every day we're consumers. Just think twice. It's helped me a lot. Just to go in every store I walk into, every restaurant, every grocery store, just remind myself before I walk in what I can do and what I don't need as far as plastics. And then to start branching out, talking to our friends, our brothers and sisters in the church, our local businesses. And shopping local does a lot of good things. We can talk to, the places that we patronize. Not just showing them, but to, speak out loud to them and show them how they would be supported to run their businesses with less plastic. That would spread awareness, and who knows, maybe more stores in Winnetka and Kenilworth would, change their ways as well. And also by shopping locally, I also thought of examples of grocery stores again. When you're shopping locally or buying more locally sourced food products and other products, you're just shortening the whole supply chain. Thus, one would guess, and I think there's a lot of data to back it up, less packaging, less plastic is needed. And then, again, it's hard to not think about hand sanitizer this year for everybody. And, what we need to stay healthy this year, and what we don't have to do as far as wasting plastic. And then, King, like you were saying here, there's a lot we can do. And individually, we can all call our representatives, federal, state, local, but we can speak as a group. And while it's not for a church to do any lobbying, we can, we know how to find these organizations ourselves, and it always helps when 2 or more people are speaking as a group. And then as an investor, that's something a lot of people don't think of. The term activist investor is not used as much as I think it could be. Speak up, when you get your proxy vote in the mail for some company you might be a stockholder in, make your voice heard. And again, the more of us that there are, I would hope it would have an effect sooner or later, better than doing nothing. Getting to know our starting local statewide officials. There's a lot of things that Illinois doesn't do that places like California are on the cutting edge of as far as policy. And then of course, it all came back to protecting our coasts, not allowing drilling for plastic or anything else whenever possible. Is anybody else, I'd be really curious, involved as a grassroots or political kind of activism that we might learn from?
I do know that there's a bill, I listened to something called Beyond Plastics organization last week. And there is a bill before Senate right now, a new bill called the Break Free from Plastics Act. And it sounds pretty promising, hopefully, if it is passed, but they're trying to ban plastic carryout bags and 10 cents charge on all their like paper bags at the grocery store too. Banning foam food containers and drinkware, and then straws and utensils only on request at restaurants. And then also putting a national deposit on glass and soda bottles and that kind of thing. So it doesn't seem like it's the answer to a lot of the problems, but it's definitely good to know that there's might be something on the horizon with that. And I had not heard about that. There was something before called the Save Our Seas, which a lot of the plastics issues went into. And now this bill seems to be getting more support than the SOS one. So
Wow.
I'm not super political, but I was happy to listen to this thing the other day. And so that's one promising thing that's out there. So anyway.
Hey,
Thank you, Kathy. I had not
Kathy,
heard of that before. You said
Yeah.
the Break Free from Plastics Act, and it's a
Act,
federal bill?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's in front of Senate right now, sponsored by Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico.
Oh,
So
but
you
it
could
started in
probably-
the Senate? It has not passed the House?
Right, correct. I think it's just started in the Senate.
Oh,
So you could, I don't have the number of the Senate Act. Let me see if I wrote that down anywhere.
So I wasn't able to attend, but I had originally signed up. So I got their information, their press packet. And
Right,
I think I can paste that into the text file, or excuse me, the chat file. And if not, I could send it out to everybody after the call.
okay.
And
All right.
what's the name of, again, Kathy, of the legislation?
Break Free from Plastics Act.
I
Okay.
just put it in the chat.
Yeah, Liz just put it in there.
Do you, oh, and you got the numbers, so right there.
Yeah.
So they've got the House number and the Senate number. And you can just like do a Google search on those numbers and it brings you up all the information. It links you to the Senate. So it's kind of fun to watch that kind of thing.
it is. Thank you very much.
That's a good thing to know, Kathy. And
Yeah.
that's Tom Udall. He must be the son of Stuart Udall, who for those of you who are old enough, remember he was the Secretary of Interior. I think.
Interior, right?
Interior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
From
Absolutely.
I think he's got-
Colorado.
I think he's got some real.
They said one thing when I listened to this thing last week, it was put on by something called beyondplastics.org. And they said right now that we're probably eating an equivalent of a credit card of plastic every week in our diet.
I'd heard that.
Isn't that awful?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
awful.
So that's food for thought. No pun intended.
Yeah.
Not the most appetizing, but thank
No,
you.
no,
Oh, but real food for thought. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
So it's, I mean, that's something, we can all just email Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth and just as Illinois
Yeah,
citizens say, is like one of your constituents, and we speak for many.
Yeah.
You know,
we can see if they've signed on to it or not. So
Yeah.
definitely. And
I'm
if
pretty
you guys, it's really easy to write Durbin and Duckworth if you guys have ever done it before. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
you just go to their website and basically there's like the form right there and you just type away what you want to say and send
Yeah.
it. And so I did that on the Land Act that was just passed not too long ago, this summer. And so I think, every little bit of that helps a lot too.
Yeah.
So
If
I was
would-
looking,
Yeah, Tammy, also our Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky would probably be a good person to reach out.
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
bet she would. I'd heard that a freshman congressman from the western suburbs who came from the renewable energy world,
Yeah.
Sean Caston.
Sean
Right.
Gaston.
He's proud to be known as the environmental geek of the House.
Yes, yeah, so he's another good guy to contact.
Yeah.
So Senator Durbin and Representative Schakowsky are co-sponsors of the bill.
Oh,
I don't think Tammy Duckworth is yet, but I believe that, I think I was also on the webinar last week, and I think they announced that Senator Durbin had actually just signed on relatively recently.
And that's the beauty
So-
of being in Illinois with our Democratic
Yeah,
senators.
It
and
is. So we
Schakowsky.
we can email them and say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
But so there were, I was really excited when I heard about this bill also, obviously. It was actually introduced back in February, so not surprisingly, not much has happened with it. And if you look at the list of co-sponsors in the House and the Senate, you may not be surprised to see that it is only Democrats on literally on each side. So it's a really good act, but it is not, there's no bipartisan support for it right now. So we can thank Durbin. The bigger issue is going to be to get
other people on board.
Get people other than Schakowsky and Durbin in other districts and states to support it. And to build on what Kathy said, it actually does get at some of the big issues. One of the biggest and best things it does is that it makes producers responsible for collecting plastics. So it takes the whole emphasis off consumers and municipalities to figure out a recycling system that, as Steve said, doesn't work because the whole industry sold us a bill of goods to tell us it was recyclable in the first place. They need to take it back. That's how the system changes and gets fixed. It'll allow for bottle deposit bills. It allows for standardized labeling system for both recycling and composting. And it also limits the export of our plastic waste to other countries. So it's a really comprehensive bill. It also phases out single-use plastics in our country, like straws and utensils, by January 1st, 2022. It's really ambitious and it's an amazing bill. It's just sort of not going anywhere right now.
yeah, I guess nothing's going anywhere right now, but thank you, Liz. You reminded me of something else. Sorry I didn't put any bullet points on it, but for years how this country, we use and waste more than our per capita share of plastics. And for years, we were just looking for third world countries that would take our recycled.
Right, but I'm going to stick with Steve's message that we've been sold a bill of goods, because I have been working on recycling for decades because I thought it was the right thing to do. And it's a way to get people to start thinking about their consumption without being in your face about change your habits. It lets people reach their own awareness about things as they're seeing the effects of their actions. And I've been building programming around America Recycles Day in November each year. And then I found out last year that America Recycles Day is an effort that bottle, plastics, and packaging manufacturers put together precisely to put the emphasis on consumers and municipalities to have to recycle things instead of taking on the responsibility themselves of putting out an environmentally friendly and appropriate a product that can be disposed of responsibly. It's all smoke and mirrors, and it pisses the hell out of me. Sorry.
Well,
But it does.
Liz, you've worked so hard for so long to find out that it was all a bill of goods.
Right.
It was all a ruse.
Exactly.
I pasted a link to a podcast I recommend to all of you with some very good original reporting by a team of journalists that do a podcast that you probably heard of, Planet Money, if you're an NPR listener. Well, they did a very good piece back in February of this year on the selling of plastic recycling by the plastics and the petroleum industry. And other than you've already heard some of the, how Liz and I have netted out on that. I highly recommend you take a listen to that. It's probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes max. And I think you'll find it eye-opening. It was the latest of several that I've come across recently that have talked about the whole marketing of both plastic use, as well as just the throwaway society that we've created all within our lifetimes. All within the last 50 years, we've created this monster of pollution moving to this disposable, throwaway, heavily waste-oriented culture that we live in and are now exporting around the world.
So Steve, I'm really glad you mentioned that podcast. It happened to come out the same day that the NP article came out about the plastics industry lying about this. So I'm going to put a link to the NPR article about the plastics industry selling us a bill of goods. Basically, the plastics industry is responsible for putting the numbers in the recycling logo. And as soon as those numbers started getting stamped on the bottles a few decades ago, the recycling haulers and companies started saying the amount of contamination that they were receiving in their recyclables jumped up exponentially, because everybody started thinking that all their plastics were recyclable because the producers put the number in the system. Like literally, they tried to make us think that this is how it works for decades. So anyway, I'll put a link to the NPR article. It's like I said, came out also the same day.
You guys, can I ask a quick question? Do you know anything about the effectiveness or what happens, like, the grocery store plastic recycling that you can do now? I end up putting a lot of stuff in there. It's like if you do get a plastic shopping bag or a dry cleaning bag or a Ziploc bag you can't use anymore, or a cereal liner bag, that can all go to the grocery store in that plastic bin outside the grocery store. And apparently that goes to making things like Trex for decking material and furniture making. Have you guys heard if that stuff really ends up doing that?
It definitely does.
Okay.
Really?
I mean,
It
so
does.
I mean, it's amazing. Like you buy something, Costco in particular, and it's wrapped in these giant shrink wrap things of plastic or whatever, whether it's a case of LaCroix or whatever. I mean, and all that stuff can also go to the grocery store. And so now that's equally, for me, at least I'd bring a giant bag of something to that kind of recycling. And a lot of people don't realize that you can do that kind of recycling at the grocery store. Just putting that out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And again, I think that I just don't want to lose the other message that the facts are that less than 10% of all the stuff that gets created annually gets recycled, despite all of our best efforts around this. We are not going to recycle our way out of it. That's bullshit, right? It was bullshit. It is bullshit. We need to call it for what it is, because unfortunately, at least downstairs in my household, everybody who has lived here and is still living here believes that it's okay to buy plastic because I'm going to recycle it. We are good recyclers. The problem is we've all bought into BS.
Yep. So let's just keep it in the ground to begin with.
We got a huge problem, Greg, though, in just changing mindset, right? So the stuff that King talked about in terms of changing family practice, that's the hard stuff to do, but that's exactly the kind of stuff we're going to have to do.
Yeah. Well, and I agree all this, and it's very, eye-opening to, hear what you're talking about in terms of the producers of plastic have perhaps used recycling as a way to deflect responsibility for what they've done. But I don't think anything we're talking about tonight is an invitation to stop trying to recycle. I mean, because
Right.
I mean, we still have to try to do that. And there's times where buying certain plastic things it's unavoidable. It's better to try to recycle it than just pitch it. But I agree with you. I mean, if only 10% is getting recycled, it's got to start. I mean, it's important for the people who care, and hopefully more people care, to take the steps to reduce or just avoid using plastic altogether. But when you can, it still makes sense to recycle. And I just go back to the program we had this past April with Mary Ellen from Swank. I mean, they're doing valiant work trying to recycle what they can. And so it's not an invitation not to recycle, but it's really looking at it more holistically. And I think it's a great point that Kathy brought up about this break free of plastic legislation. And that's where you're going to make real progress on all of this. So
And
there's
to-
not
and
one thing.
To that point, Greg pointed out earlier in his comments that it can be challenging for churches to take action on legislation and so on, but it is possible. Churches are allowed as 501c3 organizations to enter the political realm and take stands on legislation and issues. It becomes tricky and almost impossible for 501c3s to endorse candidates or political parties or ask people to not vote for certain candidates or parties. But churches are completely free to get behind legislation and speak as a corporate body in favor or opposed to legislation, federal or state or even local. At Winnetka Congregational Church, we've started what I think is probably a long journey toward, in a conversation, toward how we as a congregation can do some of that, speaking as a congregation on issues of social justice. And I would like to think that might include environmental justice as well. So we have a task force working on that right now. And somebody named Greg Frezados is a part of that. So
Yes. We're having a meeting tomorrow. I'll
okay.
look forward to reporting back soon.
And another member of our green team, Junia Hedberg, is also a part of that task force.
Yes, Junia told me she's right now, she couldn't make this meeting because as we speak, she's with the a Nutrier interfaith,
The multi-faith group.
multi-faith alliance.
Right.
I think also talking about, you
So
know,
the reason I'm making this comment is a lot of people assume that churches are violating their 501c3 status when they get involved in speaking to political leaders, and that is not accurate.
that's right. And more people should remember that. Or some churches are really active on, you know, the right side or the wrong side. But it's important for all churches to know what they're legally able to do and not be ashamed when we all know what the right thing is. So yeah, without talking about any candidate's name, I think it's completely within the purview of the IRS regulations to say to the whole church. Coincidentally, do you know that this November 4th is the day that the United States is going to effectively withdraw from the Paris Accord? What a coincidence.
Greg, in your study, did you come across anything about new forms of glass and new modes of making glass to hold liquid and semi-liquid products?
No, Eleanor, I didn't, but that's a good point. I think I've seen some headlines over the months recently about not just the use of more glass, but more efficient ways of making glass containers. Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Because, you know, before the onset of plastics, everything was wrapped in paper or some kind of a wax paper or glass containers with all the milk products, like even Oberweis still has their products, milk products in glass, and it's recycled or reused. They clean it and reuse it again. So, you know, that's the way to go because you still have a lot of yogurt on the shelves and not everybody's going to want to make their own yogurt. So I think new modes of containers, new types of materials is very important in looking forward.
That's right. And this brought me to, I learned a lot. It's been, you know, a lot of fun, actually. It's been eye-opening. But a lot of it, again, is what Steve knows is BS, because a lot of things have gotten press. A lot of things are published as news, but it's really just lobbying about, I think, something recently, a Japanese company has got this fantastic new process, this new chemical which eats plastic. It just degrades it, it dissolves it, as if that were solving the whole problem. Well, No, it's probably just going to be used to promote people to produce and use and waste more plastic. Again, leave it in the ground to begin with, rather than have a greenwashing excuse so that we can make more.
So I'll jump in. It's the greenwashing thing and the having excuses, Greg, gets tricky because again, systemically, we've been sold a bill of goods. It's not like I haven't been trying for decades to improve recycling, only to find out, again, I can't, if I meet any of the executives, I cannot tell you what I will do or say when I see them in person. But so it's understanding that the system is what it is, and then it's not like I'm making excuses. It's that we're learning that the system is flawed and we have to take different actions and advocate differently to have different results. And I want to go back to what King said and also what Steve said. Steve said, again, that's the whole thing. This is exactly what the plastics industry has wanted, that recycling is a palliative. It makes you feel like your consumption is okay as long as you're recycling the waste on the back end. And it's totally ignoring the consumption on the front end. And as Greg said, all of the resources that are going into producing all of those items in the first place have all of these effects that aren't being discussed. But so Steve and King, King mentioned Mary Allen. That's what I wanted to say. So Mary Allen is the Recycling and Education Director at the Solid Waste Agency of Northern Cook County. And I've known her for years. And it was through her that I started appreciating how weak, if you will, recycling is as a solution. I was trying to find an image, but I can't get a graphic into the chat box. But basically there's, how you're familiar with the food pyramid, the old USDA or whoever it was, FDA, inverted food pyramid. There's a similar one for waste hierarchy. And it's the preferred mode of disposal of waste. And if you just take sort of the 3 R's, reduce is at the top, reuse is in the middle, recycle is only one step better than garbage.
Exactly.
And when she said that to me, I'm like, this was 8 years ago. Again, I'm like, wait a minute, recycling is only one step better than garbage. Again, what the heck? But then it made me move up that pyramid to go, oh, right. That's why I really care about reusing and reducing.
Right.
And so, Steve, that gets to, maybe what people can tell family, again, in appropriate ways and in ways that they can hear it. Like, it's not, recycling is it's like the least we can do if we're consuming in the first place. But recognize that it's really just one step better than putting it in the garbage, and don't make it don't let it lull you into a false sense of security.
No gold stars for recycling.
No, sadly, no.
We can
You get
stop
a
feeling
C.
so good about ourselves.
Yeah.
You get a C minus.
You get a bronze star anyway, maybe.
Yeah.
Yay.
Over. Yeah. But it's
Yeah.
better-
You got a
it's
bronze
better-
star. Out of 3 options, you get the bronze.
But again, I also think it's important to not shame people or make people feel
Right.
guilty. Don't assume people are in denial or trying to come up with excuses. I was on a webinar just yesterday that's talking about solid waste, all solid waste, and coming up with a food waste program, but also a waste management plan in Illinois. And these are all people in the recycling industry and task force and businesses. And they're like, I don't understand why people are still confused about recycling. And I'm like, why not? We get all sorts of conflicting information from different sources that changes, and it doesn't seem trustworthy. They said, sort of like they're seeing, again, in the era of COVID, they're seeing a lot of personal protective equipment showing up, sometimes masks and gloves. And they're like, again, are people are people in denial? Are they not paying attention about this? Are they not listening? Or are they listening and not caring? Either one of which is not a happy answer. And I didn't pipe in. I was a member of the public, not on this committee. But in my head, I'm like, the people are recycling it because they're trying to do the right thing. Because everybody says landfill is bad. And they're like, okay, well, I should recycle this. And this mask looks like it's got some paper in it, and paper's recyclable. So I'm going to recycle it. And my gloves are plastic, and plastics are recyclable. So I'm going to recycle those because I'm trying to be a good person. They're not trying to ignore the rules. They're trying to follow the rules, but the industry has set up crazy rules. They're all gaslighting us. That's what it is. It's pissing me off.
Yes,
Exactly. Me too. And thanks for reminding me. Something I'm sorry I didn't put at least a bullet point or two about our power as consumers, or, group action, advocacy, lobbying. Besides our grocery store, how about our doctors? How about our hospital?
Oh my gosh, yes.
They could use a lot less plastic.
Yeah. Yes, a lot
They
less.
don't,
And that
because they'll say, well, no, insurance, it's got to be clean. We have to throw this stuff away. We got to recycle it. We can't
Right.
reuse anything.
Right. It's all the single use stuff. So again, I'm actually hoping that we'll get, for what it's worth, we might get some guidance on this. There are some movements at the state level, not on plastic bags specifically. Actually, I'll tell you, every year or every 2 years, there is movement on plastic bags. There are acts that are introduced in the state of Illinois every year to ban plastics, to have bottle deposits, and they're shot down every year within a month or so by the lobbyists. That's what happens. They get introduced every year, but nobody hears about them because they never make it far enough. Every year, Greg.
Yeah, the deposits. Now you're bringing me back to my childhood. A lot of states had either a nickel or some,
Right.
like the state of Michigan, or I think Vermont had a dime deposit.
Right.
Or was that just for aluminum cans?
No, well, usually glass too, aluminum is the bigger one. But what's interesting, Greg, is your perception that it's a lot of states. It's actually a very decided minority of states.
It was never a lot. You're right.
Nope. And it was a few of them. And again, in every other state, it's the packaging bottle manufacturers who lobby against it.
Of course.
Every single state.
Yeah.
So yeah, the national bill, that Break Free from Plastics Act, would mandate that kind of bottle deposit bill in every state. That's one of the features of the bill. And that would have
Obviously,
a huge effect on
federal action would be nice.
standards. Again, just standards would be nice.
Simple.
Like some
instead of 50
consistency.
different standards. Right.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter whether if you're in California or Texas. It's one country.
Right.
This is, I know we talked about federal and state. Locally, I know you're on the Environmental Commission, Winnetka. Any movement to get the Winnetka Village Council to take some steps on plastic bags or anything else? I mean, I know other communities have, so.
Yeah. Yes, you'll know, we haven't talked, this is one of those things that, so for those of you who don't know, I'm a member of the Winnetka Congregational Church. I'm also a member of Winnetka's Environmental and Forestry Commission, and I'm the founder of a nonprofit called Go Green Winnetka, which is part of a network of Go Green groups, kind of citizens action groups. So basically, King, where I hear a lot of interest in doing something about plastics is more on the Go Green Winnetka side, the citizen side of things. Recently, there have been a couple people asking about it at the Environmental and Forestry Commission. And again, it's a good example of things sort of being on hold at the government, at the village level. Things are happening, but a lot of stuff is on hold. They're still sort of dealing with sort of essential business. I mean, you know what I mean? There's beyond that, but they're still stretched pretty thin. But those issues, that kind of plastic, again, a plastic ban or a tax or some sort of regulation, those are the kinds of things that I've come to learn the council wants to hear from residents about. The council doesn't want to act and then hope that they acted in a way that is consistent with what the residents want. They want to hear from the residents that this is what they want, and then the council will enact something to meet that need. And so it's, again, going to advocacy, I'm going to type this in the chat. This was happening anyway, but it was something that was accelerated due to the virus. It's easier now to get in touch with our elected officials through electronic means than ever before. So in Winnetka, you can email our village council about any issue at any time. And if it's specific to an issue that's being that's on an agenda at a village meeting, if an email regarding that meeting is received by 6:45 p.m. the night of the meeting, it will be read at the meeting as if you were attending the meeting, like public comment.
That's awesome.
So you can send send the council an email and say, hey, why aren't we doing more about plastic bags? Because then they'll shift that issue to the Environmental and Forestry Commission and say, hey, people in Winnetka care about this. You guys should look into this. That's what we need partially to help motivate initiatives moving forward in our village, at least. So I'm putting in the email. There's one email that will go to every trustee in Winnetka. It gets shared with every trustee.
That's good to know.
Yeah, and they just did that a couple years ago. But then they did the public comment feature is specific to the virtual meetings that have been happening since COVID in the spring.
That process that you just described for Winnetka, the village of Winnetka applies at the federal level too, right? We know who's going to be against this legislation as proposed. The question, are we going to be able to get excited enough about it to bring the counterbalance to push it forward, to see it actually make progress? Because if citizens don't get excited about it, well, the lobbyists for the oil and plastics and just going to win again.
Yeah, they're paid to be excited about it.
And don't forget that the university areas and the North Shore and the people who are very well educated and wealthier have a more direct understanding of what's going on as far as plastic pollution. But, you know, we're only a small part of, let's say, this state even. And in other states that are mostly rural, the idea of recycling, they don't even know about it. And they don't even think about it because there's so much space and they don't even see the trash. So, you know, what we're thinking about is really on the forefront of what we hope is going to happen nationally down the line. So that's why it's so difficult to get. I mean, you have to have coteries of people in all the small towns too that are pushing these ideas. It's sort of like an organization, like let's say the Legal Motors, that has different local groups, and that's the only way you're going to get ahead with this. And I think really, as far as Winnetka, you really have to you know, have signatures from people who are interested in banning, let's say, plastic bags. Or, you know, anything that you want to start in that way. But you have to have the ground roots support before you can actually get legislation passed, even in the Winnetka Village Council.
Yep.
Because the rest of the United States doesn't think like the North Shore does. I mean, maybe the large cities do and the wealthy suburbs, but beyond that, you know, they've never even heard of it. So
That's a good point. It's more of an urban versus rural debate, I guess.
Imagine a day when Winnetka Congregational Church raises this as an issue in our congregation, and we join people from Christ Church as a congregation, and we join people from Winnetka Presbyterian Church as a congregation, and together we build people power, and our churches become places of organization, and we go to the village council as 3 congregations and speak with a common voice. Right? This is not unimaginable, because that also is the kind of thing that gets in the news.
Of course.
On Winnetka, and you start to build a movement beyond your town. But I think churches are great places to do this kind of organizing if they understand themselves to have that power and purpose.
Great point.
Thank you. That's imaginable.
I think that's very important, but also you have to think about where some of the major changes are coming in the United States as far as renewable energy, electric cars. A lot of this is coming for the large corporations like Apple. Apple is using renewable energy in all their facilities around the world. And so are another 240 corporations. And Amazon they claim to have carbon-free vehicles. So, you know, this can also, but I think with something like this, I think that plastics is very far down the chain of making improvements. And maybe this is what really has to be done by individuals and groups like churches and, you know, groups within small towns and across the United States. And so this is really more of a political people person organizing activity than what the corporations are doing right now as far as renewable energy and electric vehicles. And I think that's important.
And a big component of it is going to start with education again, re-education, getting what the real facts are out.
Well, then that works, then you have to be working with the schools and the school systems, which I think like in Kenilworth, I mean, Katie Kenyon, who's head of Go Green in Kenilworth, we have a Boy Scout breakfast for 700 people every year. And we have our composting, you know, we compost, we have renewable materials as far as the tablecloths and the plates and the utensils. And we come out with with 700 people, we come out with a small box about a foot long, 3 inches high of things that cannot be composted or recycled. So, I mean, it's a major effort, but a lot of hands have been working on this for a long time. And it's a people person organization, really, that's the only thing that's going to get this, help us move farther as far as getting rid of plastics within our federal system and around the world too.
You know, when I made my comment about Winnetka churches, I'm glad that our two churches, Kenilworth Union and WCC, are starting to do just the series together. That's significant. That's how we start to build relationships. And someday there might be a way for our two churches to take common action on an environmental issue. It could be related to the state of Illinois or even to New Trier Township. But we can't do that without building these kinds of relationships. And it's, you know, there's 11 of us, 10 of us on the call right now with people from both churches. And we know each other's faces. We know each other's names now. We need to continue building these relationships so that when the time comes, we're ready to speak with a more common voice on matters of public policy.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you for continuing this collaboration. We started back in April when we did our 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and there really is a great solidarity and power in bringing congregations together, united in things like this. And the more we share, the more we do this together, I think the more we're going to be able to move things forward in a identifiable, positive way. So again, thanks for putting this together. We'll look forward to more collaboration this fall and winter. And again, thanks very much for being open to collaborating with us.
Yeah, and thank you, Greg, for the research and organizing the umbrella ideas of this meeting tonight.
Thank
An
you, Greg.
honor. Thanks for asking me.
Greg, thanks again for everything that you did tonight to bring us together. Or announcements or anything else like that?
Go Green groups in Winnetka, Wilmette, Kenilworth, and Northfield are co-hosting a presentation of the Climate Reality Project. Jane Goldenberg, who is now a resident of the city of Chicago, but she used to live in Northfield and was a village trustee there for a number of years, and actively participated actually in our Go Green network. She wasn't part of Go Green Northfield, but she attended Go Green Illinois meetings. So she is now a trained leader in the Climate Reality Project and will be leading this session.
And Liz or Steve, do you want to mention about the story of plastic?
Which is the Winnetka Congregational Church, Kenilworth Union Church, the League of Women Voters of Winnetka, Northfield, Kenilworth, and the Go Green groups in Winnetka, Northfield, and Kenilworth are co-hosting a virtual screening of the movie called The Story of Plastic, which is not really a sequel per se, but a follow-up to the movie The Story of Stuff. There is a book called The Story of Stuff, and last November 2019, the Winnetka Congregational Church and most of the co-hosts for this year hosted an in-person screening of The Story of Stuff. And so I thought it would be an interesting follow-up, especially as we were talking a few months ago with Greg about doing this plastic session tonight, that we could maybe carry that forward into next month and do a screening on the story of plastic. So
Anybody else? Be well, have a good
Thank you.
night, a good week, a good month, and blessings to you all.
thank you.